get started on the presentation this evening. Thank you very much for coming along to the New Zealand Hemp Industries Association's iHemp Tour for 2022. This is our sixth town hall meeting. We should have been up to about 8 or 9 by now, but unfortunately there was a bit of a hiccup in the deep south, so we'll have to repeat those meetings. It's very exciting to have you all here because it's about bringing the word and the information about the industry to the people that are going to create it. And that's you people here in this room and the people online that we should acknowledge as well. So thank you very much for giving up your Monday night and coming down to see us. And it's great to see you all here. This evening we're going to go through, we have 3 speakers this evening, Joe Say from the Hemp Building Association, Kindilien from Puro, New Zealand, and I'll start off the conversation, and then I'll finish off as well, and then we'll have a bit of a Q&A panel discussion after we finish there. So that's the program that we'll be following. There will be an opportunity to have your questions asked and answered, so that's going to be a powerful moment where we can actually sort of look at unpacking some of the topics that we may have glossed over or only paid limited attention to given the time that we have available. From the presentations I've done in the past, it's always useful, even though everybody's a little bit aware about hemp, to just look at some of the history that we're looking at doing, especially in the New Zealand sense. I'm not going to take you back millennia, you'll be pleased to know, because in the interest of time. But, you know, it does speak to the fact that, you know, the hemp and the cannabis plant has had a relationship with humans for a long, long time. From our point of view, the New Zealand Hemp Industries Association, we were established in 1997 by a guy called Matt McIntosh down in Owaka in the Catlins Valley in the deep south. And he got us going in a time where there was a moratorium on talking about cannabis to the government. So we couldn't even talk to them about anything to do with this low THC industrial hemp because they just had a blanket no approach. So we had to sort of raise their awareness. And what we thought we would do is produce the 5-minute guide, which is this publication on the left, and sent that to all the MPs and tried to, you know, get them engaged in a conversation. And that was in 1998. And if we step forward nearly 20 years, we had Agmart helped us fund an investor report. And that's on that slide to show you sort of where we've come from. There's still a massive amount of cottage industry type approach in the industrial hemp industry, but there's also an acknowledgement of the huge potential now as well that has really developed in the recent times. And we'll look at some of those developments in this section of slides that we're going through now. But it was quite interesting because in 1998, that did work. We, along with a number of other companies, particularly Midlands, who have been in the game since the beginning and have been trialling industrial hemp since the 2000 trials allowed us to start working with industrial hemp. And of course, that related all the way through to the 2006 regulations, which we'll get to in a moment. We will be looking at these. It's just interesting to see these species, but also it's important to look at on the right here, this cross-section of a stem. And we'll be talking a bit about the various aspects of the industry. For the NZHIA, we look at it as the farmers underpin everything that we do. And then we have the 3 other corners, which are the food, fibre and health industries. So if we look at the fibre, we're looking at this, the bast fibres, primary and secondary bast fibres from the stem and the inner woody pith that we call the hurd or shiv. And that process of splitting that fibre, that stem out into those commodities of the hurd, the shiv and the bast fibre is called what we call decortication. So that's an important sort of bit of terminology there for the fibre industry. Clearly for the food industry, it's mainly based on grain, the seed of the plant at the moment. And then from our health point of view, then we're talking more about a horticultural business opportunity rather than an arable industry where we're looking at female plants producing cannabinoids, terpenes and flavonoids. So those are those important parts of the plant, and that's what makes it very interesting because you've got this one plant that produces all of this huge magnitude and variety of raw materials that industry can use. So again, not going back millennia, but going back maybe, you know, into 100 years ago, let's say. Now, of course, we all know that the sailing ships were powering commerce and things at the time, but all of those sails would have been made from hemp, the rope and the cordage. But not only that, their uniforms would have been made from hemp, the paper and the charts, oil that lit their lanterns would all had a hemp content in there. So that's how important it was in a whole range of things for driving commerce back in the day. And that's the point I'm trying to make, because it's still potentially a driver of commerce today. We should also acknowledge that, back in the early 1900s, late 1800s, it was one of the most popular used pharmacopoeia in the American pharmacopoeia, popular used medicines in the American pharmacopoeia. So, these are company brands that you will recognise today, Park Davies, Aloe Lily. These people have used cannabis as a medicine for a long time. So that's speaking to that health and wellness area, because, of course, as we're aware, the medical cannabis regime has its own regulatory environment. I always like to put this in there because it speaks to a study of Kindilien, which was, again, in the early part of the 1900s, when we were using agricultural byproducts as a feedstock into industry. And George Washington Carver, the chap on the left, he was a prime mover in this space, and Henry Ford on the right with his hemp or plastic car. Now, the images that you'll see on the websites for the 1941 version, he was a soy farmer as well as a hemp farmer, so it could be said that there would be a soy content in there. But that is irrespective of the point that they were using agricultural byproducts to make plastics and composite materials. And he's hitting that with a sledgehammer and it's just bouncing back off. So, these were things that we were doing in the early 1900s. And so it's very important to see that the history is we're, starting to repeat itself. And I think these three slides are important in the context of that history, because we're going to be talking about that investor report that I mentioned earlier mentions a $2 billion potential industry for New Zealand, including export. Now, people say billion and everybody, well, it's a bit rich, I don't think, there's quite a lot of potential, but I don't know about that. But what I wanted to do was show you back in 1938, this article in the middle is a Popular Mechanics article, written in 1938, quoting a $1 billion industry based on industrial hemp fibre. And the reason why they were able to quote that was there was a guy called George W. Shetland who in 1917 developed a decorticator that mechanically processed stems. So you didn't have to have a massively labour-intensive industry at that point. So this guy was busy from 1917 all the way through to 1938 promoting his decorticator. Finally got across the line, and they acknowledged it in the 1938 Popular Mechanics magazine. Now, when you see people say 25,000 uses of industrial hemp, this is the article where it came from. Everything from dynamite to cellophane. So it's quite a wide range, again, mainly based on that fibre industry. The Bulletin 404, the one on the left, that was about using industrial hemp as a pulp material for the paper industry. That's where the 4 times more pulp per acre than trees. That's where that comes from. And in 1935, the 1935 edition of the Farmers Bulletin, again, speaks to how hemp was being grown in the 1940s. Now, what happened was, though, we had a bit of a hiccup when the Marijuana Tax Act 1937. So you'll see straight away that we've got a bit of a disconnect in the dates. We're all celebrating an industry using fibre, creating all these composite materials, agricultural waste being used, circular economies already being developed. Unfortunately, the Marijuana Tax Act in 1937 started to tax that out of existence because you had to be registered, you had to pay $1 every year, and eventually people just flagged it and just got on with something else, with synthetics, with fossil fuel derivatives. And of course, at the same time, prohibition was ending, and you had the people involved in that industry looking for the next demon, and that was reefer madness. And I'm not going to go into a big part of this detail because you would have seen these sort of slides, but it does speak to how we ended up with the situation, because a lot of propaganda was spread around that time about the devil and the local weed and the demonisation of cannabis as a recreational drug. And it sort of all flipped on its head in 1944, when the war effort required every patriotic American farmer to grow industrial hemp. So now we had a stage where everybody used to go to the movies and they would have this newsreel, the Hemp for Victory would run before the Saturday night feature. And all of these people were encouraged to grow a hectare or an acre of hemp for the war effort, for their cordage requirements. And of course, we've got an example of the American Armed Forces protecting the hemp seeds. for that very endeavour. Now, what people possibly don't know, the Germans were doing the same thing. They had a fibre shortage. So they had a primer rather than a newsreel. They had a little newspaper, and they used a boy and a girl image to represent both the male and female parts of the plant. Same message. We need fibre. So when it was useful for us, we, obviously allowed it to happen. And then, of course, it went straight back into being a prohibited substance. And in 1961, the United Nations Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs was signed that outlawed cannabis. Now, when that was signed, and this is something that the hemp industry is everybody involved in the hemp industry needs to understand, that Article 28.2 of that United Nations Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs specifically says, and you can see it here for yourself, that the convention shall not apply to the cultivation of the cannabis plant exclusively for industrial purposes, fibre and seed, or horticultural purposes. So that's protected our industry. So even the people at the UN understood that there was a whole cultural use of growing cannabis, low THC industrial hemp in most cases, for their fibre needs, for their food needs. So that's why we have an industry now. And the results of the lifting the moratorium and having a conversation with us in the early 2000s were led to 5 years of trials, which ultimately became the Massachusetts Drugs Act Industrial Hemp Regulations 2006. And this was enabling legislation. So Objective 3 of the legislation is to enable the cultivation and distribution of industrial hemp. And they were only concerned about other parts of the industry, recreational-wise, being passed off as industrial hemp. So the only problem that they have with industrial hemp is controlling THC, and we are low THC, less than 0.35% THC. So we are, in effect, a protected industry. The Ministry of Health issued us licenses to grow low THC industrial hemp, and only industrial hemp can be made into hemp products. And when it's a hemp product, then a person can possess those hemp products and use them effectively. So it's really a wonderful set of regulations that we've got if it was being enabled. And that's the key. That's why we've got a bit of an issue there, because the people that are in charge at the moment don't necessarily want to enable the industry. They're coming up with a lot of reasons why, and they've got complications and all sorts of things. But that's the nature of working with the regulator. Just a quick celebration of some of the hemp companies that have been involved. As I mentioned before, Midlands have been there right from the get-go, and some of the other companies have joined, especially when the food law changed in 2018 to allow us hemp seed for human consumption. Of course, at that same time, we lost hemp seed for animal consumption. And we'll touch on some of those issues in my next set of slides. Just wanted to acknowledge the fibre side, because we did see Henry Ford's car, which looked a little bit dated, so I thought I'd throw in a Lotus and a Mercedes Class C, just to again explain that we have this opportunity to build composite materials from that fibre. So speaking to the point that there's high and low tech fibre uses. Now, the reason why we don't have more products in the Mercedes Class C vehicles and things is because we can't give those automotive manufacturers the continuity of supply that they need to gear up to use industrial hemp, because they're used to using synthetics and other raw materials. So again, we've got this issue of supply and demand. We'll touch on that as we go through the slides this evening. Just an explanation of some of the fibre uses and breaking those down into a little bit more detail, and an example of a hempcrete house. And we're very fortunate this evening to have Joe Say from the Hemp Building Association going to present to us all about the hemp construction materials. So looking forward to that, quite an exciting topic in the whole field of industrial hemp, again, helping the industry scale. When I like to put this slide up there because it's one of the inside front covers of the 5-minute guide. And you can just leave this slide up there and let people think about it for a long time, because it just does speak again to the huge amount of ways people can use this as a raw material or a raw ingredient if it's a food source. So from that little brief introduction, I just wanted to give us a bit of a taste of what we're going to be talking about. We are here to discuss low THC industrial hemp and look at the value chain we want to try and achieve with that industry. But before we get into my final slides on that particular subject, I'm just going to hand over to our next speaker, which will be Brian. Brian, if you could come up and take over, and then we'll go on from there.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you. Yes, Brian Kindilien. I work for a company here called Puro, New Zealand. And Yes, the topic of this conversation is low THC industrial hemp, but Puro sits in that space of producing a medical product. And a medical product, has active ingredients that are used to treat various conditions. And I can't talk about any of those things under our legislation. All I can talk about is the cultivation and production of this plant. So that's what I'll do today. Actually, before I jump into the slide, I'll talk a little bit about history too. I brought my wife and son back to America, where I'm from, about 3 years ago. We went to a Native American reservation. There's a fantastic museum there in Connecticut. The tribe is called the Mashantucket Pequot tribe, and they've created a national museum of their culture and history. And there's an amazing section where they talked about the agricultural practices as far as they knew them at the time. And the Mashantuckets practiced something called the Three Sisters planting. And typically, what's depicted in much of the museum is that it's a corn stalk in the middle. Then it's a smaller shrub down in the bottom, something like a pumpkin vine, that kind of thing. And the pumpkin leaves provide shade below that. And then the third thing is a bean that sort of wraps up the corn vine. But one of the historians there pointed out to us that it really wasn't a corn or a maize vine. It's the initial stalk. It's actually a hemp stalk. And they used it for weaving everything in their village. In fact, they were even making canoes at one point out of hemp for their purposes. So it's an amazing plant, and its history is so diverse and so interesting. I'll talk just a little bit about Puro and who we are. Established company, premium brand. Not sure what that means just yet. We're all sort of sorting out what brands mean in New Zealand. I guess what you can think about Puro is that we're a New Zealand company. Despite my accent, we are Kiwis. We're growing this here. We're not importing material from anywhere else. We're growing it here in the South Island. We're a specialist grower of medical cannabis with 2 cultivation facilities. We are probably at this stage the largest commercial grower with organic accreditation in the space. So everything we grow, that I'll show you in a couple of minutes, is grown outdoors under organic conditions. It's organic certified. And it's good agricultural practice certified as well, and that's really critical. I'll talk to you a bit about that more. We've received some government funding in the last few months from the Ministry of Primary Industries here, and that's an amazing endorsement of this plant. It's not about Puro. In fact, the funding really can't be used for much inside Puro. What it is used for is explaining how we got from seed to product and what we went through to develop that plant. And we have to show that to the rest of New Zealand. We have to give farmers and investors an opportunity to get into this business themselves. We have to demonstrate this with our organic processes as well. So this is MPI looks at this as an investment in the sustainability of this country into the future. We believe we have a strong business model within the industry and high financial. The industry itself has incredible financial and regulatory barriers. This is not for the faint of heart for anybody to get into. It's a massive investment of knowledge, time, legal issues, all sorts of things, if you want to grow medical cannabis. We have 2 proven commercial scale outdoor harvests as of this year. And to the right side of the screen here, the Puro outdoor grown dried trimmed flower in 2021, we harvested about 2.8 tons dried. That's a pretty good outcome. This year, we produced about 5 tons. And talking to my colleague in the back here, Steve, the reality of these harvests is a long and torturous story. This is not a slam dunk. This was hard work, and we made a lot of mistakes over the last 2 years, and we'll keep making them. That's the good news. Because from our mistakes, we actually learn how to do this really, really well. So our first site that I'll talk about is probably our premier site. It's outdoors. It's down in Kekerang, just north of Kaikoura and south of Seddon. If any of you have driven down that coastal highway, of course, you'll know the store. The store is that sort of midpoint before you get to Kaikoura, and that's a great place to stop. Fantastic little restaurant in there. One of the founders of our business owns that store, and right across the street, if you stand in their parking lot and look up the hill, that's this site that you see here. That's as close as you can get to it, by the way, and not for any good reason. There's no good reason that the public shouldn't be allowed to sort of come and see this thing. These flowers, these plants that you see here in the screens, you see a bit of protected cropping in the lower left, you see the outdoor crops in the upper right. Then you see the sort of layout of the drying shed, the protected cropping piece, and our water source, our dam in the back. And you see a couple of our really key people here in the photos as well. That's Winston McFarland, one of the families that owns this big farm that we have. His brother Sank is our CEO, and another brother provides beer for our parties. He runs the Boomtown Brewery in Blenheim. But Wendy, to Winston's left, is our quality assurance manager. Why do I point that out? Because if you don't have a quality assurance manager in the medical cannabis business, and you don't have science officers and things like this that add a lot of cost to your business, you will never get across the line in terms of the regulations to grow even a zero THC product for medical purposes. You have to have people you probably never thought of in the farm be a part of this. It's an East Coast operation, so with Pacific winds blowing in off the coast, I don't have a picture of the ocean there, but it's a stunning view. Just a bit more than 10 hectares of outdoor cultivation at this point. BioGrow certified organic. This is important too. What's important about organic certification is kind of obvious to most of us. If we could, we would consume organic food for all the reasons we all know. I've heard very early on in my work with Puro from people offshore who might want to buy some of our flowers someday. The problem with not so much New Zealand, but we hear from Australia a lot that things are organic. What does that really mean? Are they organic in certification? Are they organic in design? Are they using organic elements in their cultivation? It's unclear. When you get certified as an organic grower, you have then a commitment to that certification that you have to continue. It's a very, very expensive thing to do. And it doesn't help us one little bit when we're selling our medical cannabis to companies who want to buy it. Not one bit. They couldn't care less whether it's organic. What they care about is producing a drug, a pharmaceutical that is put into doctors' hands to prescribe. Organic means nothing to them. We do organic because we know it's the right thing to do. We believe over time those efficiencies that we gain from organic cultivation will actually pay off for us. So we're totally committed to that. This next piece, GACP, stands for Good Agricultural Practice. Anybody in farming would know kind of what that means. But the terms that swirl around in the medical cannabis space are GMP, Good Manufacturing Practice, GACP, Good Agricultural Practice. The point of this is if you produce a medicine or a natural material that comprises a medicine, it's got to conform to standards that are bigger than New Zealand, bigger than Australia, bigger than the US. They're developed in the United Nations. They're developed in peak thinking bodies around the world, and they're really, really important. Again, though, they're a barrier to entry. You see how this is getting very expensive to grow medical cannabis. What we ultimately produce is a high-potency CBD, CBG. So that's another cannabinoid that has some. So the folks who are backyard growers would know that these cannabinoids are incredible, and we're only scratching the surface of what we think they can do in the human body or animal bodies. But really impressive. So everything you see here is it might not sit below the 3.3 THC setting. Some of these plants go up to 0.7, 0.8. All of them are below 1%. And we want to depress that THC potency in that plant. So we spend a lot of time thinking about the cultivars and the plants that we select, because these beautiful flowers that are produced here in these pictures actually get crushed and squashed down, and the oil's extracted from them. Terrible things happen to these poor plants. But ultimately, any THC in that material is a problem for the extraction process. They actually have to mitigate that, remove it in some way, and it's not a pretty process to look at. So our journey here with non-THC plants is to drive that THC potency down, get that CBD, CBG, and all the other cannabinoids and the terpene profiles of those plants up. Our Waihopai site, this is sort of between Blenheim and St. Arnaud. It's about a half hour outside of Blenheim. Right in the middle of this viticulture region and right across from the American Spy Station, the big white domes that you see out there in the vineyards. So now, happily, those domes are gone. They went down about a month ago. Apparently, the Americans have something better now. But we're right in that Marlborough wine region, so it's fascinating to see. To me, it was a culture shock. I'm seeing vineyards everywhere, and then we come to Puro's little indoor operation, and someday you'll see some outdoor grow, but mostly what you'll see there is a big glass house. Someday you'll see this huge glass house, and it will grow our high value THC material. The reason for that is you grow that indoors. The first one is obviously security, but really you want to control as much of that growing environment as possible. This is a very expensive product. People pay a lot of money for high value THC, so we treat it very, very carefully. But again, this is a really small scale indoor cultivation. It's 3 rooms. We can do about 10 kilos in each of the rooms of high grade THC about every 12 weeks. Maybe a little more than that. But it's the thinking here is it's small scale, but it's for unique sort of boutique products that some of the pharmaceutical companies we work with will want in the future. This is a controlled environment agriculture, a CEA facility. Again, it's at high potency THC, CBD, and some one-to-one cultivars that we experiment with too. We produce these beautiful manicured flowers. This is all done by hand. At our Kekarengu site, we do a lot of curtain hanging. We do conveyor drying. We do a few different modalities. But here, everything is done by hand for good reasons. Our accreditations, I won't spend any time on this screen, but the point of this is there are 4 major licenses that you see listed here. On top of our certifications for GACP and for organic growing, these are licenses we have to maintain throughout the year. So if we renew a license in July, we start work to renew that license for next July. And it never stops. This is a team of young people who have legal backgrounds and do fantastic thinking in this space. It's a hell of a lot of work. And in fact, if you think about it logically, we really don't grow as much cannabis as we grow paper to print and send to a government agency and get approval for. It's a bit disparaging, but for those of you in this room who've been at this a long time, this is nothing. We've been doing this for a few years. 20, 30 years from now, this will be an amazing process, but we'll have a lot to learn. So what I want to talk about very briefly today is the results of our harvest this year, some of the learnings we got out of this, what's important. If you want to wade into this field of medical cannabis, I'm happy to talk to you at any time. So grab a card or take my details, and we'll connect you to the folks in our business who can help you. But it's an amazing journey, as Steve will know. The benefits of achieving consistency, repeatability, growing a natural pharmaceutical product. What people tell us when they want to buy our flower over and over again is great. I love the outcome you've achieved, or maybe it's not exactly what we want, but we're going to try your product. We'll test it, put it through its system of scientific assays and that kind of thing, and we'll let you know. But what we want to know now is, can you produce it again next year and the year after and the year after and the year after? The reason for that is, by the way, it's the same plant, the exact same plant, year after year. Because to go through all of that paperwork to reclassify your pharmaceutical product would cost them millions of dollars to do every year. It's brutal. So repeatability, scalability, give me the same cultivar year after year if it's successful, and I don't want to talk about anything else. Just give me that. And then can you make more of it? And by the way, can you reduce the costs year after year? Because that's going to be an issue too. The reason to grow indoors versus outdoors is quality, reliability, consistency. Outdoors is lower cost. That, my view, only my view, better product. Nature will do a much better job than a glass house in this. When you look at the whole plant as opposed to an active pharmaceutical ingredient, nature will do a better job. So those challenges: consistency, compliance, nature. We had a lot of water this past year. We'll get a lot of water in the future, probably maybe this year. It's a La Nina event, 3rd year in a row, very unusual. But nothing's unusual in a climate that's in balance, and so we've told our insurance providers that there's no way to mitigate against storms, typhoons, earthquakes. You can't plan for those things. The best you can do is diversify and sort of spread your risk around a bit. Standardization. This is a big thing in the medical space too. So this is a picture of some of our high-grade THC material. These buds, these flowers, what eventually buyers around the world are looking for. Maybe before I say that, I'll stop there. There's a strange phenomenon in the cannabis medical space We have doctors now all over the world prescribing pharmaceutical drugs with cannabis in them, and they're doing a really good job. They're lifting their education levels and other things. But if you look over in Australia, it'll happen here too. You have an adult recreational market chasing after the medical market. There are generally people in their between the age of about 25 and 45. They want to do this legally. They want to consume cannabis, so they'll go to their doctor. Maybe they've got a good reason to do that. The doctor will write them a script, and they'll get their high-grade THC or their CBD product, and things will improve. There are people who have a real medical need for that, and that's a whole different space. The adult recreational space is chasing the clinical prescriptions to legalize their interest in this flower. So when I talk about this particular flower and we want consistency, it's got to be a top flower grown. It's got to have the right moisture content. It's got to be export ready, a lot of these things, but also to look really good. If it's for an inhalation purpose, that flower's got to look like something they're familiar with and people really appreciate. It's got to smell good. It's got to feel good. And all those other effects that may help them is all part of the business. So that's not something many companies are prepared for. If you're growing a high-grade CBD flower with no THC in it, those are less of a concern. But people still are chasing that particular space too. You know, the green fairies in New Zealand can tell you a lot of stories about people who have a need or do not have a need. If they don't have a need, it's a whole different thing. So it's an interesting challenge in this space. We dry, we trim, we mill, we package, we test it, and then we clean everything. This is every day during harvest, probably 3 times a day, and that's a 24-hour cycle. So at harvest occurs in New Zealand. For us, it tends to be at that March-April timeframe, just around Easter this year. And all of us at Puro go down and help. So I've been out in those fields you saw a couple of slides ago. I've been bucking, trimming. I've been in here sorting, bagging, more trimming. We all do it, and this is a hell of a job. I mean, it's a lot of work. But what you gain very quickly is an understanding that this is a very, very special plant. This is not like anything you've ever dealt with before if you've had no experience with cannabis. And the fact that it's a medical product means you have to adhere to standards that most pharmaceutical products go through, but in the agricultural space, we don't think about all that much. All of our harvesting equipment has to be absolutely cleaned. The inside facilities, the dryers, the conveyors, the curtain shields, everything has to be cleaned 3 times a day. It's a huge job. And then we get to optimize the process. So if you're growing a plant like this, how do I get it more efficient? You saw the beautiful little bushes we saw before, but I would like to have these. Mm-hmm. I'd like to have these nice big trees. I can get a lot more flower from these trees than I can from the bushes. So folks like Steve brought this reminder tonight, and I love that. I love that reminder. We have a long way to go before we get our beautiful little bushes up to that. That's something that optimizes the business and gives us a better outcome. Measurement, recording, experimentation, modeling and simulation. This is a big field in cannabis now. It comes off the field, but what happens to it when it starts going through machines? Interesting question. Modeling and simulation can help you predict some of those things. Doesn't look like your average kind of farm, does it, when you throw all this stuff into it? The environment of harvesting is really interesting too. I talked at another event about the risks and rewards of an outdoor grow, and I was in Australia, and I got kind of poo-pooed by a lot of folks that build big glass houses that they're growing everything indoors and undercover and protected. But I say, well, what does your medication end up costing in the retail space? What does a pharmacy sell it for? $300 for a 30 ml bottle? Are you kidding me? I'd rather grow it outdoors at pennies on the dollar and do it really well and get all the benefit of nature contributing to this plant. Steve and I were talking a few minutes ago about cultivars. Cultivar differences, what you pick to grow, really, really key. I spent 10 years in Australia and the government there in Victoria, attracting companies to come to Australia and plant their cannabis plants. Little did I know that was probably it was a great conversation. Australia is a great growing environment as well. New Zealand, I think, is one of the best in the world. In terms of the environment and the space and everything else, it really works well between these two countries. But the cost of growing something in Australia, depending on where you are in Australia, can be astronomical. For whatever reason, you see these press releases from Queensland and Brisbane and companies growing up in the tropical north of Australia. It's the worst possible place you could try to grow it. Mold, mildew, all those things start to have an effect on it. But this cultivar selection is really, really key. You got to know where you're going to be growing this, how you're going to grow it, and which one will achieve on the outcome. Fertigation, soil conditions, these are the inputs that we study and think about all the time, and even then things go wrong. Plant management, trimming strategies, canopy exposure. If you've never gone out and trimmed or bucked a cannabis bush, it's an incredible experience. My hands didn't actually close for about a week after spending 3 days there. My muscles were so sore, my shoulders. I mean, it's a really hardy plant. It's an incredible experience to do this. But it's also a big cost to the business. Puro has 25 people at the moment on staff. So 25 of us descend on Kakaringo to help in the harvest. Doesn't touch it. We then bring in 60 hortus workers, folks from Vanuatu and other Pacific Island regions. These young men and women go plowing through the fields like a herd of locusts, and they're incredible at it. They do a much better job than we do, and the skill level and things that these folks have is amazing. We get to balance out the workforce with the vineyard industry because our harvest happens just at the back end of the viticulture harvest. So we take advantage of those workers and bring them down to our site. Technology. Probably one of our biggest technology pieces is weather monitoring. We don't just go to you don't look on your phone to see what it's going to do tomorrow. We've got to we try to read all the inputs to that and see what's going to happen. And even then we get that wrong too. Fertigation, testing equipment. These things are critical. This is this cool looking device here is actually a trimmer. It gets all the little sort of sugar leaves and things off the flower and creates that nice looking bud that a few of our pharmaceutical customers want. And sort of the last step in the process is bulk packaging. Most of our flour goes into big 25 kilo mylar bags that you see here on the right. That's our high grade CBD material that goes to our partner in Auckland, who's Helios Therapeutics. Helios is a fantastic company. They buy most of that product you've seen in these slides, and they turn it into a CBD tincture and oil. It's not on the market yet. You'll see Helios products if you go to the cannabis clinic and places like that. They're very expensive. It's an imported isolate from an extraction process that Helios imported into New Zealand about a year ago. But I think in about the next 3 to 6 weeks, you'll see the first New Zealand CBD extraction tincture on the market from Helios. It'll be Puro's flower underneath. So it'll be an organic, GAC approved, grown right here in the South Island flower. And that'll be the first time a medical product grown and processed in New Zealand is available. Pricing will do what pricing does, but I'm optimistic that we've given Helios an amazing cost of goods on this plant. So hopefully that's reflected in their retail offering. I think they'll do that. So we grow things at a very large scale. That 5 tons that we produced this year is all packaged in this form. And we do some small batch cultivation too, but that's a distraction. The key here is growing what our customers want to buy. And our customers aren't just whoever can pay the bill. Our customers are companies that fit with us. Helios fit with us really well. We got along with them very well. It's a big deal to Puro. I think in our mission statement, it says we don't work with assholes. I think that's kind of cool. We don't. We actually genuinely like the companies we work with. We genuinely like to get in and know their business and work with them. And we want their advice. Labor impact. Yeah, I mentioned the overlapping with hortus workers and viticulture workers and others. If you're doing things at this kind of scale, finding efficiencies like that is really critical to your success. This is just an example of some of the material we produced this year. So we show our customers this kind of spreadsheet. It might give our product name. It'll give a potency that you might see here in the middle, the active ingredient. So it's a CBD product or it's a THC product. You can see the volumes that we have in the far right column here. Those volumes are to sort of tell you where the buyers are. The buyers today in New Zealand are looking for that high-grade CBD material that can be turned into an oil, a tincture, a pill, a gel cap, something like that. And I say this a lot, but it's quite true, and it's a benefit to everybody in this room. New Zealand and Australia, we kind of sit in the past. And we look into the future. Some of the rest of the world has moved into cannabis very aggressively. Canada, parts of the US, the EU, Germany is about to go to an adult recreational model. All of these things are really interesting. We sit here and watch all that play out. We can learn a lot from that. We can learn everything from that if we pay real attention. So today, this top 1 or 2 CBD products, that's a winner here in New Zealand. But times are changing. People here are getting used to the fact that I think now there's a tea you can buy. There's a flower tea you can buy from Naboo Pharma. And the tea is not really a tea. It's, of course, just a THC flower with instructions on how to brew it. And I think Naboo sells a vaporizer with almost every order they get for this tea. So this is changing perceptions in terms of medical practice. And I guess what's important for growers here and anybody interested in industrial medical applications of cannabis, you've got to be really sensitive to where the trends for buying go. Today it's CBD and oils and tinctures. I guarantee next year it won't be. Next year it'll be these THC products that you see here. And we put them on this list even though there won't be any big commercial scale buyers for them. Put them on this list because we're testing them, evaluating them, looking for those efficiencies, because next year when I have this list, it'll have very few CBD products on it. There'll be 1 or 2 there, but it'll be small scale. The scale will shift over to THC and it'll shift into flower because it's adult recreational market is chasing it a bit, but doctors are also getting more comfortable prescribing. Thank you for your time tonight. I know it's not strictly an industrial hemp application, but I thank Richard for inviting me to this and inviting Puro to be a part of this. This is a picture of our drying curtains for some of our CBD product. Feel free to catch me after the presentations. Grab a card, happy to chat at any time. If you want to get into the medical side of this business, happy to talk about that as well. But thank you very much, all.
You know, the sort of the fibrous varieties from the seed. Yeah.
To cut it down.
There you go. But it does present some interesting sort of harvest questions, and putting a combine through that.
You won't get a combine through.
No, I doubt whether anybody would want to try it. But then there's an opportunity there because the tech required to harvest that could be something of interest worldwide. Because
if you grow that at more stems per square metre,
then volume
will be narrower.
Yes, yeah, it would have to be.
But the volume will be up.
That's it. But is there a huge amount of herd, and what's the herd like? And this is where it'll be very interesting in our next speaker, because Joe's going to come up and talk about hemp in the construction industry.
Hello. So my name's Jo Say, and I'm based here in Nelson, and it's lovely to see you all. And thank you very much, Richard, for inviting me to be here. It's really delightful to be able to speak to you about my passion, which is building with hemp. You might already know about building with hemp, that it's possible, but a lot of time I'm talking to people in a bigger audience and they will say, God, I didn't even know that you could build with hemp. And a big part of what I'm doing and on behalf of the association is to actually raise awareness of the fact that you can build with hemp. Not only can we build with hemp, but my vision is that we should be building every single new house in Aotearoa from hempcrete. And you can say, well, why? Why should we be doing that, Joe? Well, this is why. Because in case you haven't heard, we're having a little bit of a climate emergency, and we're either going to go underwater, this is Japan, a couple of years ago, or we're going to catch on fire. This was Nelson 2 years ago, but of course, you'll have seen what's happening in Europe at the moment. I mean, I'm making light of it, but it's a huge, huge catastrophe that we've got on our hands. And this is why I am so passionate about building with hempcrete, because hempcrete is capable of saving our planet or contributing to a solution to save our planet in terms of climate emergency. So we'll have a look at how that actually works, because the construction industry is one of the biggest single causes of greenhouse gas emissions. In the whole of the world, they say it's about 40%. Here in New Zealand, often it's quoted as 20%. But basically, it's a big lot of carbon dioxide that's being emitted into our atmosphere as a result of the embodied carbon of the construction materials that are used, but also the actual lifelong operational impact of heating and cooling our buildings. This is one of the big culprits. This is the baddie. It's concrete. So, if you look around Nelson, it's like every day there's another slab tilt concrete building being erected. And I just want to cry because we know about the embodied carbon of it. So we don't want to carry on doing this. We've got to find a solution. So, just to give you some basic figures, if you're able to see those okay, that, yes, as I said, 20% of New Zealand's greenhouse gas emissions are caused through the heating and cooling of buildings, but also the embodied carbon of them. And so 1 cubic metre of concrete produces 300 kilograms of carbon dioxide, but 1 cubic metre of hempcrete removes 100 kilograms. It's like pretty obvious, isn't it? One gives off 300, one takes 100 away. So even with the lime as its binder, and we'll talk a bit more about that in a minute, but the lime that's in hempcrete, that's how you form hempcrete. Even with that, and of course lime does have lime is part of the cycle of getting eventually to concrete production. But the lime that we use in the hempcrete as a binder has got a much lower carbon footprint. And so because, as I've got there at the bottom of the slide, that each acre of hemp is actually removing 10 tons of carbon. And these are ballpark figures, of course, because it'll depend on the actual cultivar, it'll depend on the growing conditions, etc. But a rough figure is it's taking out, every acre of hemp is taking out 10 tons of carbon. So in hempcrete, even with the lime that's in it, because hemp is such a high sequester of carbon dioxide, that overall it's a carbon negative construction material. So we've got, our government has just realised, okay, we need to do something about this. Let's do carbon zero buildings by 2032. That's nice. Obviously, my question is, how the hell are you going to achieve that? Because builders here don't know how to build with carbon negative or just carbon zero construction materials. They started saying, we could use double glazing. Yes, that's a nice start, but we're actually going to have to start using construction materials that are actually carbon zero. Well, let's bring on hempcrete onto the stage. It's carbon negative. It's not just carbon zero, it's carbon negative. So every hempcrete house is actually a carbon sink. So if we did build every single new house in Aotearoa from hempcrete, we would actually be systematically sucking all of the crap out of the atmosphere. That's one very important reason why I'm so passionate about it. We have got a quarter of Kiwis living in damp, cold housing, and it's wintertime now. It's a horrible, cold winter's night. And to go home to a cold, damp house, it is not good for our mental health. It's obviously not good for our physical health. A quarter of us are living in damp, cold housing. It's only in the last year or two that the government has told landlords that they have to start insulating houses. Literally, they've just started saying, it'd be a good idea if you put some insulation in the houses, guys. But unfortunately, the majority of landlords are going to put in these nasty pink formaldehyde-soaked bats. Obviously, this picture makes me feel slightly nervous because there is a small child in the middle of them, unprotected. But yeah, so this is what the majority of landlords are going to be putting into their rentals. As a result of Kiwis living in damp, cold housing, we have some of the highest rates of bronchitis and asthma in the whole world. The health bill for us each year is something about 7 or 8 billion New Zealand dollars of people having to go and receive treatment for asthma and bronchitis. And living in damp housing is an exacerbator if there's a pre-existing condition, or it can actually cause it. It seems like every day I'm reading stories on my newsfeed about black mold and the impact of black mold. And people are living with this, and they develop chronic illnesses that they cannot treat or that are very costly to try and treat. And so the cycle goes on. But there's a solution, and it's called hemp trees. So this is beautiful Barbara's house down in Wanaka, a Hempcrete house. She actually runs it as an Airbnb. So if you ever wanted to go down to Wanaka and stay in a Hempcrete house, check her out. Hemp Studio, Wanaka. It's beautiful. Look at this beautiful plant. Such a miracle plant, as we've already heard earlier from Richard and from Brian. You know, this miracle plant that we've been given has just got so many applications. And yes, you can build with it. So here is a field of hemp. This field of hemp, I suspect that this probably is a Midland Seeds farm down near Canterbury, or in Canterbury rather, near Christchurch. And as Richard referred to earlier, that whole process of decortication, we now have a decortication factory in Christchurch, and that's only been operational in the last 9 months. It's up to full speed now. It's churning out the burst and it's churning out the herd, and the herd is what we build with. So it goes from this field. This is a close-up shot of a stalk. It's very exciting. And so those you can see the beautiful sort of webbed or meshed pictures, fibers. I'm looking at a picture. That's the bast fiber, and that internal piece is the herd. So the herd is what we actually build with. And this is a close-up shot, and you can't see the watermark that I forgot to take off across the middle of the picture. That is of this is basically the herd, chopped up, dried, processed. This is what gets delivered to our building site. So we can ring up the factory in Christchurch, we can put in an order for our herd, and it's going to get delivered to our building site. Now, that's actually, apparently they are shipping it all around Aotearoa. They are literally shipping it up to the far north, up to Waiheke, all over by boat, but it's also going by land as well. So obviously the issue that we've got at the moment, I mean, it's fantastic that we've got a decortication factory open. This is a $10 million brake line facility in Christchurch that was opened up in conjunction between the hemp farm. Dave Jordan has pioneered this development, but he's also, the hemp farm has worked in conjunction with New Zealand Yarn, the wool people, and also Carfields, who are the farming contractors. So these three have invested $10 million, and it's now churning out herd and it's churning out bast fibers, which is fantastic. And you can already probably anticipate what I'm going to say. We need one of those on the North Island, because at the moment, yes, I showed you that field of the seed in Midlands, in the Canterbury region, and that's great. So if we're living on the South Island or close-ish, it's kind of making sense. As soon as we start thinking about shipping down biomass from the far north down to Christchurch to be decorticated, it's like, yeah, how is that going to work out in terms of the logistics, in terms of the cost, in terms of the carbon footprint? So I'm very excited about the idea of us getting a decorticator on the North Island. Would it be another $10 million facility? I don't think so, but hey, who knows? Who knows where we're going to go? A really exciting piece, I think, of the overall ecology of hemp in Aotearoa at the moment is how can we bring over a smaller decorticator from Australia, because they've got one over there that's being developed and is being used by the ex-hemp company down in Tasmania. If we can get one of those that actually fits into shipping containers and get it somewhere on the North Island, it might be Taranaki. There's a lot of hemp action happening in Taranaki at the moment. But ideally, we want a central facility run as a co-op or as a private company that farmers and growers know that they can bring their biomass to. They don't have to ship it all the way down to Christchurch. So this is kind of on the horizon, I think, as part of the overall ecology. And I'm talking about that because hempcrete, as a construction material, this factory is a game changer. Now that we've got this factory, we're not having to import the herd from Australia. This is a binder, very exciting close-up shot of the binder. Yes, it's my visual aid. It's basically, this product is actually coming from France. So we don't want to be importing a binder from Europe via Australia into New Zealand. That's bonkers. We have been mostly using a hemp binder, a binder that's come from New South Wales, from the Australian hemp masonry company. That's what most of the houses in New Zealand have used. But very exciting. There are three at the moment. There are three companies rushing to the line. Who's going to be the first to produce the binder? There's definitely two that are very close, and there's a third kind of more exciting kind of geopolymer kind of product. But if we just talk about the binder, like, you know, bags of lime-based glue or binder, however you want to think of it, there are two companies at the moment, or individuals, groups, that are getting very close to bringing it to market. And that's fantastic, because we have to have this binder produced in New Zealand. I'm a property developer. I'm going to be building houses in New Zealand, in Nelson, and I want to only be using a New Zealand binder. And the other builders I know are saying, we want to wait for a binder that's being produced in New Zealand. So it's coming. Hopefully next year we'll have it. This is a close-up shot of a hempcrete wall. It gets more exciting. And I'm showing you this because it's just exciting. But this is the hemp mixed with the binder and the water on the building site. And we use a hand-placed or hand-cast method so far. I'll talk about other methods later on. But what you can see here is the hempcrete has been mixed. It's been mixed in a pan mixer, and it's been placed quite gently into this temporary, we call it formwork or shuttering. And it will take a few hours to set. Once it's set, that shuttering is going to come off. And you notice that it actually looks quite lumpy or quite light. So some of you will be familiar with rammed earth. I haven't worked on rammed earth myself, but obviously you can tell by the name that it's rammed. That's because it's got rammed in the title. This is not rammed. This is gently tamped. So it's very light. It's lightly tamped-crete. So yeah, and we do that, and not because we're lazy and we can't be asked. It's because it's actually keeping the air within the product. And that air is part of what gives it a high R value. And we're talking about that in a minute. So this white tubing is a conduit that we run our services through. Definitely the electrical services would be run through these conduits before we actually build. So if you imagine that the hemp is actually going to be cast around the frame, we want to know that we actually run the servicing conduits throughout the whole build before we install the hempcrete. And people, I'm going to answer this question now because people always ask me it. What do you do if a pipe fails or what's that word? A wire fails? And I think you do the same as you would do with any other house. You would know where those pipes and those wires are run because you've got a plan, because you've got your conduit servicing plan, and you would be able to gouge out or take out that area. You'd fix it, and then you put more hempcrete back in. So it's very rare for that to actually happen. If you think about it, it's a very rare occurrence, but it is possible to do it, to fix it. This is a hempcrete sandwich, and you can see that we've cast around the timber frame. We use 3604 standard frames for hempcrete. That's what's been used so far. 3604 is a standard, pretty widespread throughout New Zealand for residential building. And so the frame itself is the load-bearing aspect of a hempcrete house. It itself is not a load-bearing product. So it's the frame of the house, the 3604 standard frame, that is actually taking the weight of the house and the roof. And then the hempcrete is officially, it's called infill walling. And within our building code, you can actually infill with anything. It's about proving to your inspector, well, this product is going to perform according to our building code. We've got a performance-based building code, and it's going to actually perform in terms of weather tightness and durability, which hempcrete does, absolutely. So I think this is actually an American build, but you can see these two guys are taking off some homemade formwork, and people will create their own formwork as these guys have done, or you can buy proprietary plastic formwork, but they have built their own. And this house is about 150 square meters, and It's obviously waiting for its render to be put on. We say about 8-9 weeks for a hempcrete house to fully dry out before it's ready to actually have its render put on the outside. And that is quite often what people will say, that's what puts them off the idea of, for example, doing a subdivision in hempcrete, because it's this scaling up. And how do we actually scale up the industry? As a one-off builder, you can afford to have that time. You can be doing other things. If you've got very tight timescales and you're wanting to build 30 houses, building them out of hempcrete when you've got to wait for that time, I would argue that basically it's about project management. It's about effective project management, and you do other things or you stagger your builds. I mean, it's not rocket science, but that's when people get very excited about panels and bricks, which we'll look at in a minute. But this house is 150 square meters. As a ballpark figure, 1 acre of hemp gives you about 50 square meters of house with about a 300 mil thick wall. So this house took about 3 acres of hemp. So kind of gives you just a rough figure. Again, it's going to depend on the cultivar, on the climate, on all of that stuff in terms of how much, but it's a rough figure just so you can sort of get your head around it. Another of the beautiful things about hempcrete is you can make non-linear shapes. So really whatever shape or form your formwork takes, in this case you can see it's been configured to make a curve, it makes a curved wall. And that's a very beautiful feature. I think that's a lovely, the fact that it has got that artistic quality to it. Of course, it's not going to appeal to everybody. Some people want very square spaces to live in, and some people are happy to have a few more curves, and that's a beautiful thing as well. Something for everyone. So this is Matt and Melissa Lowe with their house in Taranaki. I think theirs was the second house that was built in Taranaki. And you can see from that shot that from the exterior, you wouldn't look at that and say, oh, that was built, I bet that was built from hempcrete. It just looks like a modern house. And I think it's important to say that if one does want a very rustic, dare I say, hippie, hobbit look, one could go for that. But if you want a very modern, crisp, modern look, you can have that as well. It's really going to be about the quality of the render that's put on the outside of the house. So I can't read what it says. I think this basically says what are the positive things about hempcrete construction. So the first thing is, as we've already talked about, that it's carbon negative. It's a carbon sink. That's a really big, important thing. So I've put it back up there at the top. But it's got really high R values. So remember I showed you the shots about people living in cold, damp housing and the high embodied carbon of running houses. In terms of heating and cooling. If you live in a hempcrete house, I can guarantee you will be using virtually no heating or cooling. You will not need heating or cooling. You put some on for ambience, but there are houses in very cold places in England, where I'm from, that are not using any heating, and there are places in very hot places in Australia that are not using any cooling. So I'm not saying zero, but absolutely minimal. And that's because it's got a very high R value. All that air I told you about that's in the actual product, as we don't ram it down, it's quite aerated. So it's got a high R value, about 4.25 for a 300 mil thick wall. But it's also got strong thermal mass performance. As thermal mass is when, imagine concrete, and it can absorb the heat that's inside a building, and then it can release it again. That's called, and then that's sort of like a very sort of basic, my interpretation of thermal mass performance. So rammed earth is brilliant. It's got a very high thermal mass performance, virtually zero R value. Straw bale, it's got really high R value, insulation value, very, very minimal thermal mass. So this is why hempcrete is so I like to say, the creme de la creme of building materials, because it's got both. And it's those two factors working dynamically together that actually give you a passive house performance. So I'm not going to get sidetracked by passive house because that's a whole other strudel. But what I do know is that those two elements working together, the high R value and the thermal mass, gives you a passive house performance. Oh, hang on. Hang on, I forgot. There's other very important reasons. So it's got a natural hygroscopic. So we talked about dampness. So this long word, hygroscopic, natural hygroscopic capacity to regulate humidity. What that means is, on the inside of a hempcrete house, just put your hand up, please. Has anybody heard about the whole jib bonkers fiasco madness going on? Just me and oh yeah, it's yours. Okay. Right. So we've all heard about it. It's like brought the construction industry in New Zealand to a halt because they can't find any jib board, and so because there's this bonkers monopoly by Carter's or was it Fletcher's, then it's a real issue. Builders are going out of business. It's a real issue at the moment. A hempcrete house, you don't need to have a lining board. You've got that internal, the internal surface, and I'll show you a bit in a bit. You'll see it, but I just want to make sure I didn't forget. That basically, a hempcrete interior does not have to be lined. So what we would put on it, we can either leave it raw and put it like just a breathable water silica product on it, which is lovely, or we can plaster it with a lime-based plaster. So what that means is it could look like this room that we're in now, but it would have a breathable lime or clay plaster on. And the reason I'm saying that at the moment is because a hempcrete house is a breathing house. Hygroscopic means the capacity to absorb moisture once the humidity level rises in the house. So if it's a rainy day like today and people are putting washing machines, showers, blah, 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 cooking lots of boiling things, there's lots of humidity in the air. Now, if you're in a house that's got a nasty toxic seal on it, all of that moisture stays in the house. And it can lead to mold and it can lead to all of the associated health issues that we talked about. If you've got a house, a hempcrete house, that's got a hygroscopic capacity, it means that the house is literally breathing. So you can't have mold, you can't have condensation, because it's a self-regulating organic structure that you're in. So it's breathing. That's a massively important quality. You cannot set fire to it. It's non-flammable. And I'm sure you've all seen, or some of you will have seen the YouTube videos where there's people with blowtorches like standing there trying to set it on fire for an hour. It's like, no, this is not setting fire. Okay, so you can't set fire to it. And if you think about all of the tragedies that have happened, particularly in Britain, with the tower tragedies that have happened, because they are cladding buildings with flammable materials to save some money. Yeah, so obviously it's bonkers. So we've got it as non-flammable. We live in an earthquake place, as we know. It's got really good seismic performance, and it's very lightweight compared to concrete. And that's why this lady's going, but why, Joe? Why aren't they all building every single new house from hempcrete? And I don't know either, but I'm on a mission to try and make it happen. So here you go. You can see this is an unplastered, a raw look. And that will have probably a water silica, a breathable silica or sealant on it. I'm saying water silica or water glass. That's one product I know that it's a bio product and it's breathable. So you might just put that on. You could put nothing on there, but I suspect that it's probably better just to have that on, just to give it something to help with any dust coming off it. But this is the third house that's just been built down in Wanaka, Keith Stubbs' house, and this is a hempcrete house, and it's been finished with either a lime or a clay plaster inside, so you wouldn't know that it was made from hempcrete. And I like to have a little bit of both, so you can have the contrast, and that's why I like this shot, because you can see the unrendered look next to the rendered look. And as we've talked about the hygroscopic capacity, yes, you can have it in bathrooms. It's not like it's a specialist thing you can only have in one part of the house. You can have it unplastered in the bathroom. This is Swindon. That's where I was born, in Britain. It's a dreadful place and you don't ever need to go there. But Kevin MacLeod, who he hosts the UK Grand Designs programme, he's famous for saying that hempcrete is his #1 construction material, not just as like an alternative eco product, but it's the number one construction material. And he built these. There's actually 42 of these in a triangle shape, and they creatively called it the Triangle Project. And those are in my hometown of Swindon. You wouldn't know that they're made from hempcrete, even though they've got funny chimneys on top. So can you put hempcrete in the roof spaces as insulation? Yes, you can. Can you put it, Joe, can you put it under floors? Yes, you can. But it's not a load-bearing material. So as you can see there, it's between the joists, so we'd still be putting a flooring product on top. And I talked earlier about how, or maybe I didn't, but because we're casting hempcrete, we're casting it by hand, we're basically filling up every cubic inch of space, that there are no cavities, that's what I'm trying to say. So what you don't have is thermal bridging. So thermal bridging is wiped out, and you can see from this window close-up shot, which is, we get a lot of thermal bridging in window areas. This negates that. And this picture is literally just to tell you that even dogs are happy living in hempcrete houses. They're happier. It's their house of choice, because that's Matt. So yes, you can spray it. So if we want to talk about how can we scale it up, because it is quite labour intensive. It is a labour intensive material to install by hand. So we can spray it. And there's actually somebody arriving in New Zealand soon who is an expert hempcrete sprayer from the UK. So who knows, maybe that's going to help the industry kick off here. And these are not Weetabix. They're hempcrete blocks, obviously they're hempcrete blocks. And so there is nobody in New Zealand at the moment who is producing these on a commercial basis, and nobody has built with them yet. But in Australia, a company called Hemp Squared, literally 2 weeks ago, won this big national award for their hempcrete block business and innovation. So that's really taking off over there. And these are panels. So people like to say, oh, but why don't we do prefabricated panels? And so we can put together a house in 1.5 days, because that's what we need to be doing. So yeah, I can go for that a little bit. These hempcrete panels created again in Britain, this superstore. If Marks and Sparks are building with hemp, I mean, come on, it's like, everybody's going to be building with hemp. So hempcrete panels would be created off-site in a warehouse, in a factory, and they'd get brought to site, a bit like a 3D jigsaw puzzle. So nobody is doing that so far in New Zealand. I suspect that I know 2 or 3 or 4 people that are looking into it. So, that could be happening fairly soon. And this apartment block in Puglia, in Italy, have a guess what it was made from? You know what I'm going to say? It's made from hempcrete. And it was built by this person. Just literally, he's very advanced, and he built that whole apartment block. And, it just goes to show you are never too young to start building with hempcrete. So this is my land. I'm kaitiaki of this land that's in central Nelson. And I am intending, I've got resource consent for 15 houses, and my intention is for all of those houses to be built from hempcrete, including my own. And so I'm putting my money where my mouth is, and I am only going to sell those sections to people that want to build, that are going to build from hempcrete. Build it themselves or use a builder, I don't mind, but they've got to be built from hempcrete. They've got to be built from hempcrete. So this is our association. When I say association, I really mean group, but just sound better to say hubba. So it's hba.nz. So if you want to find us, my cards are there. And if you ever want to talk about anything to do with hempcrete, please do get in contact. We've got a Facebook page which is updated all the time. So yeah, if I've left anything off there, but do get in contact with me. I would love to talk to you. If you've got somebody that's considering building with and thinking, could hempcrete be a fit? Do get them to reach out. I'm always happy to have a Zoom or any other video platform. So thank you.
So exciting times. I think what I'd like to do now is just take a moment to check the Q&A, and Oh, question for Joe. Just as you've sat down, Joe. Talking about the availability of local binders, pozzolanics.
Yeah.
What investigation has been carried out so far from Nelson Pines fly ash waste stream?
I don't know of any direct work with the Nelson Pines, but I know that people have done some experimentation with fly ash and other sources.
It's just not me. No,
So it's a work in progress, and we'll get to that why it's a work in progress in a moment, because I'll cover that off in a couple of my slides too. So thank you for that question from why hemp. So the reason for the tour in 2022 was to try and attract people to the room that we're going to create the demand for industrial hemp, because at the end of the day, we've got plenty of farmers that are willing to grow industrial hemp. But I haven't met a farmer yet that hasn't asked me two questions. Who am I going to sell it to and how much am I going to get? And those are really, really good questions, because if you can't answer those questions, you shouldn't be growing industrial hemp, because then we're going to burn the farmer because no one's going to buy their product and then they won't grow hemp again. And so we've got to really manage this scale, and that's what this tour is all about, because it's about attracting the people that are the end users. And they're very, very important. If we look at construction, for example, or a higher tech use of fibre, if we don't know what that specification is that that end user wants, we don't know how to process the fibre to meet that specification. We don't know how to harvest and ret the fibre to meet that specification. And it goes back to, and Brian alluded to it as well, the genetics. We don't know what plants we need to grow to produce the plants that ultimately we will meet that specification. So when you're bringing together a new industry based on a new raw ingredient and raw material as a feedstock for that industry, it's very important that we understand those industries and the people that already exist in those industries, because we're not reinventing the wheel here. We don't have time to do that. But the people in construction are already doing construction and building materials. People in composites are already making composite materials. They know what they're doing. They just need to know that there's a new raw material out there that they could be using. And that's why we're trying to get these light bulb moments to happen, trying to get those industry people to go, that's a really interesting thing about industrial hemp. That's why I need to put it into my business plan. And we'll talk about some of those interesting things as we go through, because that, with that understanding, is going to help us scale. Because again, you know, we could be providing a whole lot of raw hemp into, pick an industry, paper, and that's great. But they're going to turn around and say, I want 5,000 tonnes a week, and we don't have that. But how are we going to manage the scale to get to that point? And that's going to be our tricky part. So the more people involved, the easier that outcome and that collaboration is going to be. So for us at the Hemp Association, what's the why for us? Well, the MPI has just put out a document in June 2021 looking at some of the, you know, what could happen if we had a fully facilitated hemp industry. And there was quite a range of scenarios that they had, going from 11 million to 774 million. So it's, you know, this is by 2030. So even they acknowledge that depending on what assumptions you're going to make affects the outcome that you're likely to achieve. They went for a scenario 2, which gave us a $30 million industry by 2030. And our document that we produced in 2021, written by Dr. Nick Marsh, we thought that we could probably get a sort of $500 or $600 million industry just on food and fibre, hence that scenario 2 that we've got. But if you include the nutraceutical industry, which is now, when we're talking about, you know, we're privileged enough to hear from Puro today about the medicinal side. But even medical is a subset of that health and wellness industry, which is a subset of food be thy medicine, as it were. So you've got this massive opportunity. Sure, there's going to be some regulatory tweaks and things like that, and we'll get to those sort of in must-haves as we go through the conversation this evening, but it's about finding a champion in the government, and that's what we lack. You know, in 2000, when we had those trials, there was people like Philip DeBuncle, Annette King, Rod Donald, you know, across all sorts of parties that were willing to say, hey, that's a great idea. Let's see how far New Zealand can take this and back us to do that. We just simply lack that now. And we've got to make it a safe environment for those politicians to realise that they're going to gain political capital rather than lose it. And it is a safe environment because we've got a perfect storm. We've heard it from other speakers this evening. You've got resilient supply chain issues, Jib. You've got climate crisis. You've got some aspirational numbers that the government wants to achieve as far as export potential or job creation, regional development. All of those things could be aided if they really did embrace a hemp industry, and for the reasons that you already know about and some of the ones that we're going to be discussing in the next few slides. But it's about that value chain. You know, clearly we've got to move away from a commodity-based approach. Definitely not the way Puro, we're seeing it. New Zealand has got a great story. We tell it, depending on what product you're looking at, well or not well, but it's still, we've got a good reputation out there. And we need to be moving up that value chain. We can't compete as a commodity with the American, the Canadian prairies can produce an awful lot of hemp seed for grain. And so we've got to look at what are the global niche markets we could really attract. How can we go up that value chain and export value-added products? And that's the exciting thing, because all of that entire value chain, there's gaps galore throughout. And that's about our scaling, and that's about filling those gaps. So there's a lot of people out there that need to hear about industrial hemp because they're investors. So they could possibly go into that primary production space and say, okay, well, I can see that decorticator that Joe was talking about in Christchurch. Very correct, Joe. We don't want to use, this is a bulky raw material. You don't want to ship it any further than sort of 50K. So you've got to have a decorticator where you are. And then we start getting scale, and then you start looking at full plant utilisation, which is realising the revenue streams from all parts of the plant, and suddenly the economics start making sense. And you're getting this regional development happening because all of that activity is happening close to where you're growing it. So all those testing labs, all that skilled and unskilled labour and all those other elements that go into the value chain are going to be attracted to regional New Zealand. And that's going to help it go forward. And then you're going to see, again, an explosion of scale, and then you're getting into biorefineries, using industrial feedstocks into, agricultural raw materials and byproducts, because we see ourselves as a complement. We want to be a complement. Our fibre would go really well with New Zealand wool or merino. The people involved in farming rotations are looking for alternate land uses. We make that work. We match that. We're a good example of something that would work well in that farming rotation. So if we look at that value chain, where are the gaps? What are the people interested in? And that's what we're trying to attract, those people in the room that are going to say, okay, I'm in construction material, that's where I want to be, and start working and creating and demanding that they have raw materials for what they want to achieve, because it's going to satisfy the consumer. And if we look at the consumer as our leader in every occasion, then if we're satisfying them to a certain degree, you've got a successful business plan. So let's look at those four areas, the farming, the food, the fibre and the health. The farming, you need an industrial herb licence. That's going to cost you $511, including GST. You're likely to have to do a THC test, especially if you're a first-year grower at the moment, because of some adverse THC test recently. Just about everybody has to do it, so it's a compliance cost, which is a pain because it doesn't add any value as far as a useful thing for us as an industry to do. But those are the requirements. If you've got a licence currently, I'd like to recommend and remind you that your annual return is due by the end of this month, for all those people out there that haven't done their annual return. Well, yes, the end of the month is the end of this week. So time to get on to that. That's a compliance that you have to do as a licence holder. And but it's not arduous. And the whole process of getting the licence isn't a tremendous problem. So if you can get that licence, you're underway. Now, there's various reasons that you're wanting to grow, and we'll talk about the food, the fibre and the health markets, because obviously if you're going to produce a cash crop, you want to sell it into those markets. But it also needs to be acknowledged that you could be growing it just from a phytoremediation point of view because it works well in your rotation. It's going to clean and condition the soils. Now, there's some massive claims. People talk about Chernobyl, growing in Chernobyl and lifting heavy metals. But when you start trying to find the science, there isn't a lot of science there behind it. So we need some New Zealand-specific information. We've got some tremendously polluted land. DDT was sprayed quite regularly up until not so long ago. Cadmium under orchards, all these sort of things. We've got a lot of land that could be productive again, but we need to understand, is hemp as a bioaccumulator, this is in a very short growing season, 4 months over the summer, similar to maize, can accumulate 25 wet tonnes in a hectare. That's phenomenal. And as we were joking about the size of the stems and things, I mean, I've seen photos in the Waikato that look like a tropical rainforest with these two little wee chaps who are grown adults standing in front of a field of 4 or 5 metre tall hemp. Now, that happens, that we could do that every year. What are we going to do with it? That's the challenge, sure. But if it helps us clean and condition soil so it's ready for the follow-on crop, that's got to be a good idea. What's the effect on the follow-on crop? So we need a lot of study. We need a lot of understanding around how it fits into our farming rotation. And it's not just the nitrogen uptake and with dairy and things like that, but it's also about CO2 sequestration and understanding that sort of side of the equation as well, because that could all come into the mix around this full plant utilisation. But if we look at the next step as we go up, if you're going to be growing for a seed crop, you're also going to have an MP1. So that's one of the food control plans, and it's something that a lot of agricultural farmers may not know because they've grown maize for their beasts and never had to worry about food grade material and feeding into a food grade industry. But this is human food now, so you do have to have an MP1. So that's another little compliance issue. Not a big deal again, just a matter of applying for it and knowing that you need it. But the reasons why you grow for seed, I mean, this is an amazingly nutritious food. It's got all your amino acids, all your essential fatty acids. It's in the perfect relationship or ratio, especially for the omega-3 and 6 that the human body needs. So again, it speaks to how much of a relationship that humans have with this plant for such a long time. And it's going to really speak to all sorts of amazing industries when people start using it in a wider variety of products. And again, it's those sort of inherent qualities of the seed that the food ingredient manufacturers need to know about. But again, they need continuity of supply. They need to know what they're buying every year is going to be the same. So there's a lot of food testing and all those sort of things that are going to be required. There's also, when we're talking about growing, and Brian mentioned it as well about the varieties and things like that. We're very fortunate in New Zealand that the latitudes that are covered are very similar to the northern hemisphere latitudes where industrial hemp's grown. So it means that we could be replicating or multiplying seed for them in their off-season. It means that those varieties grow very, very well in both ends of the northern latitudes and the southern latitudes. So we're in a really fortunate space in New Zealand as far as the hemp industry goes. When we're talking about food, we also need to acknowledge that the food law changed in 2018 to allow us human consumption of hemp seeds. For those that aren't aware, there was an application put in front of Food Safety Australia and New Zealand last year, which will be coming up for nearly a year, possibly shortly. And that will allow people to be able to use not only the hemp seed, but the flowering tops, the leaves, the sprouts, and the roots for food. So when that application works its way through our joint relationship with Australia and our food code, then that may open up another exciting market for the hemp food industry. We've heard a bit about the fibre industry as it relates to decortication and in the construction side, but there's an acknowledgement also that we need looking at these sort of high and low tech sort of aspects of the fibre industry, because the low tech in the sense of insulation from the bast fibre or the hurd being used as a hempcrete, but it should also be acknowledged that that same hurd could be used in animal bedding, and that's a popular use for it in the northern hemisphere markets. It's always been traditionally used as a horse bedding there, but in a wider sense, the whole animal industry. And that's again because of the inherent qualities of the fibre. It's just easy to spot clean. It absorbs really well. So you don't have to throw out the whole pen. You just go in there, take out what has been soiled, and off you go. So it's just an amazing fibrous, is I think from my point of view, one of the main elements of the hemp industry, but it's going to be a long and slow journey. You know, people have had a joke, how do you make $1 million in the fibre industry? And the answer is you start with 5 million. So that gives you an indication that it's not an easy job, but again, it's something that will eventually happen, and it will have to happen at scale. Now, why will fibre be useful? And it depends on who's in the audience. Because if you're say a medical device manufacturer, and I said that naturally industrial hemp fibre is going to be naturally anti-static, antimicrobial, antibacterial, antifungarial, stops 95% of the UV light, and is nature's longest, strongest fibre, you might be starting to think, well, crikey, I like the idea of having that in my medical device or on my sheets in my hospital, because they would wear longer and be a lot healthier for my patients. So it depends again on where you're sitting, what end user are you? You might be from a roading contractor and might hear the story that if I put some fibre into my hot mix, the hot mix is going to be lasting longer and the road will last longer. And that might make it, you know, some light bulb go off in your mind and say, oh, well, we better do some investigation on that, because that sounds quite interesting. And if that's the case, then we need to use it in our roads in New Zealand. So again, how do we get these facts, these inherent qualities? How do we understand them? How do they apply into industry? But how do we get industry to buy into the idea or to hear the story, this good news story about resilient supply chains from sustainable raw materials produced locally? And that's the message. And if we get really good at doing that, we're going to have an industry on our hands. Of course, we've got a branding issue because, you know, we're talking about low THC industrial hemp. And you know, a lot of people, you know, I went to my local MP and watched his eyes go from hemp to cannabis, and I could see it forming, and the next word out of his mouth was bad. And that's the way it was. But again, we need to change that narrative, because it's not bad. In fact, it's very, very good. So the fibre industry's got a huge potential. The decortication is a real rate determining step for us. But if you looked at other construction materials like hemp wood, which is made in America, and they're taking the stems and just putting them under incredible pressure and making a wood. So they're not decorticating at all. They're just pressing these stems together with a pea binder. So, or a pea resin. So, you know, you can be natural and you can be all that sort of thing, but it's about these other high-tech uses as well. When I first started in the industry, there was no such thing as 3D printing, for example. But now you can obviously make 3D printing filament out of hemp fibre. Now, if we could get that at commercial scale, that's another one of these things that are going to help to create a demand. And if we can match that demand with that supply, we can go into these new innovative industries. But if we can't give them the continuity of supply at a specification that works for them consistently, year in, year out, based on our understanding of how we're growing it, even with the environment we've got to deal with, it'll never work. So we've got to really make a concerted effort to really match that up and understand what the customers want. And then, you know, people will invest in these decortications because there'll be a bankable business plan. And there's not an investor out there that doesn't like the idea of a bankable business plan that's replicatable at scale. And that's what we've got with our hemp fibre and food industries particularly. When we've gone around the country, we're looking at regional strengths, regional resources, regional capacities. And some regions, like, for example, Canterbury, where the grain is often grown, have a strong capacity for that food industry to grow a whole lot of seed for that market. In the Nelson area, it's a possibility. Fibre, not so much, in the sense that you don't have such a big range of broad-acre arable land. So it would be similar for Nelson and Northland and other places in the country that have really tremendously long, good daylight lengths. So East Cape, a little bit of Coromandel. All of those areas really suit the horticultural aspect of this industry. So growing female plants for that health and wellness industry. And if we looked at that spectrum of food at one end, and then we move up, and then we look at functional foods, and then we get into natural health products, and then you get into nutraceuticals, and then you're really into this wellness and health industry. And then just before you make any medical claims, you stop there. And then if you want to go all the way through and grow high and low THC plants, then you would have to do your clinical studies to make medical claims, and you'd have to do all the compliance. Now, there's a serious difference in price between our $511, including GST, for an industrial hemp general license and a medical license, and a whole range of types of medical license. Now, one of the reasons for that is the risk of diversion. We don't have a big risk of diversion. No one's going to take a low THC industrial hemp plant and try and sell it as marijuana. And no one's going to, want to take our low THC and think it's marijuana. So people in the medical industry have both of those issues. They don't want to lose any plants because they're very expensive to grow and they're very highly controlled, and they don't want to have it diverted into the legal market for the same reasons. The regulator doesn't want that to happen, but also the producer doesn't want that to happen because they just spend a lot of money producing that plant. So our industry, the low THC industrial hemp industry, has a huge opportunity there in that nutraceutical market, that natural health products, functional foods. These are all buzzwords that are, considered mega trends. The consumer's looking for these. They want sustainability. They want a better story. They want products that work. And here we have this raw material that meets all those requirements. So it's a very exciting opportunity. And what we're talking about there, particularly if we move, as I say, from the food into those natural health products, are the cannabinoids, terpenes, and flavonoids. So these are very exciting elements within the plant. When I started in the 90s, there was possibly 50 or 60 cannabinoids that they used to talk about. There's probably over 120 plus now. Now, of course, we all know about THC, the controlled drug. We don't have a lot of that, so it's not too much of an issue for us because we grow low THC industrial hemp, CBD, prescription medicine. So that's, got a regulatory implication because it's been classed as a prescription medicine. So it's got a bit of an issue there. But given all the fact that all these other minor cannabinoids that all exist in the plants, they all have a role to play. They all have markets. They all have exciting futures that people could be developing into. And in Nelson, you've got a very advanced food industry. You've got a very advanced scientific community with Cawthron, etc. So you're in an ideal place to really take advantage of those sort of applications in that food and wellness industry. So there's quite an opportunity, I'd say, and given all the other work that could be done with other New Zealand botanicals, really telling your brand story, coming out of Nelson, and then you're starting to look at geographic indicators and all these other things that are available to you in New Zealand and places where you can really differentiate that story and tell it tremendously well to global niche markets, because those are the ones we want to get into. We can't, as was discussed in the past, can't compete from a commodity point of view, so we only need a square mile in San Francisco could probably take most of the oil that we could produce. Why not? And then we can all concentrate on doing that, and we can work together. The wine industry are really good examples. Let's learn from these other industries because we see ourselves as a complement to those other primary producers, the wool, the dairy industry in rotation, forestry even. We're a fibre just as they are. We can complement what's going on there. I'm wearing some socks, New Zealand Merino, industrial hemp and possum. They're lovely socks. The shirt hemp, the jeans are hemp, the shoes are hemp, T-shirts are hemp. So it's only a matter of time before you guys are starting to wear hemp. And that's what you can do as consumers, is start demanding those hemp products and supporting that industry, that are the people that are bringing in and importing shoes and importing sunglasses. And really help those people along while we build this industry. But I think, when we've had to come up with some ideas for the Nelson area, and that is definitely one of them, that horticultural, that female plant approach. And it also speaks to the fact that there will be geographic areas in New Zealand that don't want pollen in their areas because of the illicit market. And we'd be fools not to acknowledge that there's not an illicit market of cannabis in New Zealand. And those people, again, want female plants. So if we as the hemp industry can grow female plants in those areas, then that's a win-win. Again, we're complementing other industries. Even if the government doesn't want to acknowledge it, it's still a relatively important issue for people to consider, depending on where they're growing industrial hemp. So just we'll have some Q&A so we can unpack some of those things I've said and take a deep dive. But before we do that, I've just got to acknowledge a couple of things that are going on in the hemp industry. And one of them is, as a person registered for any of the events that we've had during the tour, you will be going in to win the possibility of winning a gift basket provided by some of our local hemp companies. And for those that are joining or rejoining the association during that same period of the tour, there's an opportunity to win a Harkin Zander, which is a high-end cosmetic. And again, it speaks to how, with good marketing and good product design and good product manufacture, you can really market this at the very highest level, all the way through to a hemp seed oil in the local four square. As far as next steps go, I just want to acknowledge the work that Callaghan Innovation have done. They've got 3 roadmaps for seed, fibre and medicine. They've also just released 2 weeks ago a white paper that was co-funded by the Bioprocessing Alliance around the waste streams. So again, they're already thinking about this full plant utilisation and how we can use the waste streams from our seed industry, fibre industry, both the medical industry and the New Zealand Hemp Industries Association were involved in helping give the industry feedback required in that document. And there's some really good outputs from that. So Callaghan have been very, very useful, and I would encourage you to check out the roadmaps. And Te Puna Kōkiri have some really interesting fact sheets on growing industrial hemp, especially for Māori landowners. So there's some good resources there. And what we're trying to do as part of this tour is to talk about the strategy reset. We've mentioned about the branding issue we've got and how we need to change the narrative a little bit. But if we can get the industry to sort of agree on a shared vision, then we've got the potential to really bring a capability program together, which would help the government to understand how we are a joined up industry with a shared vision that are willing to work together in a collaborative way to really move it forward. And we've got some ideas about how that might work. And we're working with other members of the industry to really sort of see if there's a will within the industry to put that together. If there is, that's great. We'll give it a go. If there's not, then we're a fragmented industry and we'll carry on as we are. But it seems that we've got an opportunity, because not very often that you bring in a raw material to industry or a raw ingredient to the food industry that has the inherent qualities that hemp has. So everything's up for review. Everything. The way you do business is up for review. Who's going to do what, how it's all going to work. It's all up for review. And things have changed. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can learn a lot from the wine industry about how they've exported. We can learn from the wool industry, how they've got together, how Zespri's working for a single body, if you want to go that approach. All of these things, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We don't have time to do that. But what can we learn from all of those experiences and really apply them in this new way? And what does it mean to really have an economy now that is different to what it was before? People have shared, they approach things differently. Uber, it's all about sharing resources. What does that mean for an emerging industry? So that's what I mean by everything being up for review. So if we can get these collaborative approaches working and really come up with some amazing understandings, and we have a massive role to play in this because of their long-term approach to business plans. Then we've got a real industry that we could be proud of in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And one of the things that we're looking at doing is looking at setting up a portal, an online community, which is this Aotearoa, New Zealand Hemp Alliance, which will hopefully be able to showcase some of the recordings that we've made on the tour and help people to get through their journey a lot quicker by sharing information. So they can come in and say, right, I'm interested in fibre. Okay, I've met the people at Waikato University. They're going to help me do this, and I'm going to make a 3D printing filament, and I'm going to take on the world and start exporting container loads tomorrow, which would be a great thing. Go global from day one. NZHIA would be happy about it. So big thanks for our speakers, the Hemp Building Association and Puro. thank you very much, guys, for coming out on your Monday night here in Nelson. And it's important that we do capture that information so we can share that with that growing community. The big acknowledgement must go to AgMart that helped fund us. They've really been supportive of the industry for many, many years. They've helped us with our overseas speakers at industrial hemp summits in the past, and they're just amazing to work with and really supportive of not only the hemp industry but other emerging primary industries and what we're trying to achieve for New Zealand. And of course, you know, I wouldn't be doing my job unless I encourage you guys to become members of the association. The portal is going to be really useful for building that community, and because not everybody wants to join an association and things like that, but it does help us to keep in touch. And by joining with us on this tour, you will now get the public newsletter, which will come out every couple of months. And the members just get a little bit more, well, a lot more information, and there's a members' resources, and there's, you know, quite a lot of support and information that we can provide for those people that are actively involved in the industry. So I'd encourage you to do that. It's $25 for an individual, $25 for a supporting or a student, $50 for an individual, $100 for a business. So it's not a huge amount of money at this stage, but we're a membership based organisation, so we can only do what we can, as our business as usual can afford us to do, which is really just doing the newsletters and doing the social media, but we really need to really work in that public space. But I think the Aotearoa Hemp Alliance portal might give us a vehicle for opening that up and trying to attract those industry dollars that then can be matched by the SFFF and the Callahans, and really get some of this foundational or pre-competitive knowledge that we all need to move the industry forward. So thank you very much. That's the end of the slide presentation. So you've done well, everybody. You've soldiered on. You've got there. I'll just have to reconfigure the layout for a moment, and then we'll come back together for a panel discussion. So thank you, everybody, for allowing us to sit down and do the Q&A, because, you know, the production value was right up there. And we're all here. So here's your panel. Anybody have any questions from the audience or anything we've discussed this evening?
So how much does it cost to comparison concrete to building a house? Obviously, building a house, so I know it's spent concrete.
Yeah.
Could I just say something?
Oh, God.
Because our speakers here, the recording may not pick up your question, so we'll repeat the question and then ask the question if that's right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So that question about how much does building with hempcrete cost? And this is a question that gets asked a lot, of course, and understandably so. And I think prior to maybe a year ago, we would have said that hempcrete was about the same as a house built from red bricks and concrete blocks, just so you kind of have a sense that this is a house housing methodology in New Zealand that's quite fairly common. We would have said it was about 10% more than that. So in terms of that midline, maybe 10% more. So not the most expensive and not the cheapest. It's impossible to give you a square meterage. But what I would say now is that because construction materials have really escalated right across the industry in the last year, I would say that hempcrete is now sitting in that mid-range, not 10% above it, but actually in that mid-range, because you can use, for example, I was just saying to somebody else, we can use untreated timber in a hempcrete house. So we can use untreated Douglas fir, untreated macrocarpus, so we haven't got that issue with the hold-up of timber arriving into our country. And with the herd now being produced in Christchurch, we're not having to import the herd. I think once we get the binder produced domestically here as well, we're not having to import that. I really think it's going to bring down hempcrete to be at a very equitable cost to a sort of a middle range construction methodology.
So if you're trying to grow hemp in Nelson, what's the total, like the minimal area you need to sort of make profitable?
So you're asking how much hemp do you need to grow to in order to decorticate to build a house with?
Well, no, just in general. So if I was going to grow hemp, on some land, what's the minimum amount of land I need to be a sustainable business to grow?
Oh, that's a huge question to unpack. Yeah.
You can grow how much you like. You just apply for that on your license to MedSafe.
Yeah.
So if you want to grow a hectare, you put in a hectare. If you want to grow only 20 square metres, 20 square metres.
Yeah.
It's just like a sustainable business idea.
Yeah. I'll put the European background. So, I always looked at growing hemp as a crop, just what it company said, it removes all the toxins from soil and helps it come into the soil and all those sort of things. But yeah, a friend of mine grows it, but he has to grow away from the road. And I've looked at the area I've got, it's right next to my state highway. Beautiful cut of land, all flat, full draining well, and perfect growing. But I'm like, can I grow there, or do I need to plant a whole bunch of poplars or something to create off the road? Or is that change, or is it going to change in the future?
At the moment, that's still a question on the application. Is your crop visible from the road?
I'll say no.
Well, then they'll Google where your land parcel is and say, isn't that a state highway? And but it's there is discretion when you're making your application, that the Director General does have the ability to say, well, yes, I could see that it is visible from the road, but it's down a hill, across a river, and then, and I can barely see it. But yeah, at the moment, it wouldn't be, in my opinion, viable for you to have it across a fence off the state highway, just because it's just too quick. I mean, in a few years. Say again?
Or something like that.
Yeah, possibly a break crop, or rather than doing the poplars, we'll put it up. Yeah. And then, so back to your original question, though. I mean, a lot of people are talking about if they do a seed crop, and admittedly, then you're looking at. Yeah, exactly. So you've got to have some infrastructure to do it, and of course, if you're growing for seed, moisture is the big one. So you've got to
just grow it and smash it out, nail it, and send it down south. For whatever product you can turn into. I don't know.
It would the transit
actually. If you've got small growers, if you're trying to establish hemp here in this region, you're relying on small blocks of land.
That's it. That's what I'm saying about a nutraceutical industry. And then your individual market.
And you're going down the medicinal route. It's probably very labor intensive, right?
It could be, but you could, you don't have to go to the whole medical level to get your nutraceutical market. But
so does your organisation help with the growers that you find like the product?
No, because it's the cart before the horse, and you'll hear it a bit, the chicken and egg scenario. So we don't have an industry yet, so how can we provide you with an order for your product? Yeah. You've got to come up with that.
Yeah.
So,
but it's a conundrum, right? And that's why you guys situation. So you need somebody in your organisation, in my view, to be able to pilot growing that market outside New Zealand, to be able to support the growers to actually grow it, to be able to justify putting stuff in.
That's it. And
because if you've got an order for it, which isn't hard to get, if you can go out and get that order, then you can obviously put that order and say, sweat promise, and we've already got these growers already lined up to or whatever. And that wouldn't be too hard to coordinate.
No, so that's a business plan for some entrepreneurial person in the hemp industry to go ahead and for sure. And that's
why isn't there that entity within your organisation? Because if you guys are piloting this, you're really trying to grow the thing, which is working. Like, I wish there was these people like people like yourself. Why isn't that in place? Especially with the fact that the government know about this. I mean, we think they'll be throwing everything at this to support it.
Yeah.
Back to finding that champion. Yeah, no, we're back to finding that champion within the government. That MP.
But that champion can be within your organisation to go to government to get new resources. I mean, we've done it ourselves with our business, and we've been able to raise the amount of money that's out there to source. Yes. If you just talk to the right person, or if they know, I guess, if the right agendas in place, it's there for the taking. And very fortunate to get the funding and things we've had, but we've also wasted it. Stuff.
But that's all learning.
Yeah, it's all learning and stuff. But I think, it's we just bring down the path and manage to source something. It's there. It just needs that person to go and smash it out.
I mean, there is a certain amount of government. I don't know the latest on the government sort of support of hemp, but I know, for example, that the decortication factory, those that that group of businesses down there, they've just received a large amount of money from MPI to actually explore the applications, the potential practical applications of herd and bast. So there is some government support there. There is support from Callaghan's Innovation for the testing of the 2 different binders, and then this third geopolymer, that one that's just come on as well. So there is some government support there, for sure, but it's definitely that chicken and egg situation driving up.
That's a problem, man.
Well, and also this government support comes with industry dollars. So the 1.3 million that Carfield's got for the decortication line, they would have had to put in 3 or 4 million into that. That said, though, when they were doing a presentation in Christchurch, when they went to the SFFF, the first thing SFFF said, what, 1.3? Don't you want 10? So they're ready to go. If our industry could organise itself and say, okay, well, we've come up with 10 now, we could leverage another 10 and really get that pre-competitive foundation.
Like 2 million, it sounds like a lot here in New Zealand, but it's nothing.
Oh, given the amount of interest from overseas as well, I mean, this is one of the most studied plants.
It seems nonsensical in some ways. There's some really good wines around. We've got the land, it's just, we've got the export, we've got some good people that know how to market. Just get it happening.
Sounds like you should be coming on board. NZHIA, please come on board. Do it.
But definitely, and that's why we're doing the tour, so people can hear that idea, get enthusiastic about that idea, and make it happen. And then we're all going to benefit from it. But right now is the best time to try and get that, pre-competitive information out there. And with that foundation, I mean, when you're funding the Crown Research Institutes and the universities to do all this work, they're creating a huge cumulative knowledge. It's all those PhD students that have been working with Professor Kim Pickering at Waikato University for the last 15 years on fibre and how to make 3D printing filaments and how to test fibre and all that sort of thing. They're now entering the fibre industry. So they're going to want, especially if they've done their thesis on it, they're going to want to have work in the industry. So it's sort of self-fulfilling. So the quicker we get started, definitely, it'll be just amazing. And then you've got all that information that then you can get the additional funding to apply it. And that's when you're creating the big IP and all that sort of thing. So there's lots of ways to skin that proverbial cat, as it were. But exciting from exactly what you're saying. Why isn't it being done? Because it just needs more people to get involved and make it happen. And it's you, young people, that I'm just pointing the finger at. Just saying.
We're talking.
But yeah, there's an endless amount of opportunity there. And all the things that you said are right there for the taking and for the making.
And I mean, the opportunity within construction, as I showed with the slides, prefabricated panels. So I've spoken to various people about this as a potential business opportunity, but just needs somebody to actually run with it. The hempcrete blocks. In Canada, there's a company called Just Biofiber, and they've just won a huge amount of a government grant to produce their blocks. They've got biocomposites, plastics in them. And this is meaning that these blocks are load bearing. People get very excited about them because they look like Lego bricks and you can put a house up very quickly. People are very excited about them. So everyone's always saying, where can I buy those blocks in New Zealand? It's like, not yet. Pardon?
There's no product driller.
There isn't a product yet, exactly. And they're not exporting to Canada, from Canada. But there's these opportunities talking about it's there for the taking.
There's crazy many products you can make out of that company industries that benefit. I'm mainly in the dairy industry as well.
But there's a complement there as well. But then you look at when we've been doing the tour and engaging with economic development agencies, and Joe mentioned it also with Taranaki. It's a classic venture. Taranaki have just been amazing. They've got this whole branching out concept, which they're trying to encourage all sorts of alternate land uses, but they have one big section on hemp construction. And there's a person there that won a competition, so they're going to make a snip board, and I think the company's Panelese, and suddenly that might spawn a whole industry around it. And then suddenly you get a few, I'm not sure whether Fletchers or your Cardholt Harveys are agile enough to really pivot quite quickly, but some of these second or third tier players would be going, well, I'm hearing about some mill that's about to go into receivership because no one wants to, put the energy and the working capital in there to make it happen. All they just need is a willing partner in the hemp industry, and away they go. That's what really the joint venture between Carfields and Hemp NZ was based on, a fortuitous meeting of minds. And suddenly this wool industry joined the hemp industry. And they had the amazing knowledge of the whole production value in that wool side that they could apply into the fibre side. And now they're ready to replicate that into other areas of New Zealand. And the beauty of what they're doing, because Carfields are involved, they've got a real strong, because their history was farming contractors. So they know how want to work with the farmers and keep those farmers on board. So they know that the farmer needs to make a return. So their business plan is also involved in making sure that it starts with the farmers willing to grow the crop because they're going to get a return, and it flows all the way through. But when they start replicating that, that'll be, again, a bankable business plan.
Somehow lift the ego just with the power of girls to be whatever, especially the amount of times you can grow.
Yeah.
And crops pretty impressive.
Yeah, but that's wet, so you dry up. But
it's good to manage. It's amazing.
Yeah, but we can't feed it to animals at the moment. So we've got that whole issue going on there as well, that you can't have animals in the presence of a controlled drug or a prescribed medicine unless they've been approved by vets or. Well, that's the crazy thing. In 10 years' time, maybe everybody will want CBD infused milk. Who knows?
Is there any? You were talking about how some other countries like Canada or Germany, I think another one you mentioned, that have gone kind of more full steam ahead, I guess. Is there any studies that show the sort of the economic benefit that's happened, that maybe that would be a way to approach somebody in government to become the champion of it, is to say, is there anyone far enough down the track in another analogous region or country in the world where you could say, well, look, they've invested in it and this has been the outcome?
And there's pockets, but
I just don't think that it won't happen in government. It has to happen from a community base. And this is all business in New Zealand.
yes.
But I mean,
We want
to
move
get
away.
rid of the law that says you can't feed it.
As far as regulation, yeah.
No, but
But the thing is, that regulation won't change until the government is saying that this is bringing good income, good returns to New Zealand.
USA is a good example. They are good to grow recreational THC and CBD market over there, and the increase of people involved is tremendous.
so there's information that's like that, the tax take.
Similar situation is in Europe where CBD is legal and it's understood by law like supplement. Supplement. So you don't need to go through the medical things. You just go to the supplement. So and there is a plan with very rich companies. Switzerland is very rich. And if you want to look at like financial data, do the research in Europe and USA.
But they're all facing.
For New Zealand, and for New Zealand people,
Yes.
because I know, because I've literally gone through this over the last 3 years. So with our business, even though we're dealing with a different waste stream, it's the concept remains the same. And so we're trying to present products that people never heard of before or know the benefits of, and then try and tell that New Zealand story behind it. So and at a premium price. So how do you get? There's a real science you got to go through to get people to actually commit and purchase and be part of your tribe. Get on brand. Come back and purchase off you again. At the end of the day, sale did it. You have a sale, you can't really do shit.
Well, but again, we need a product that the consumer wants. So what is that product?
But that can be anything. I mean, the market's so broad. That's not the issue. But we've already got products that consumers want. It's tapping into those markets and having somebody land those deals and make that happen. Because that's what's going to drive the ability to do the other stuff, like grow the products, grow the technology.
And there is plenty that we can do. There's some things that we would like to do, like worldwide, everybody's facing this issue about animals. It's just one of those things. Suddenly, in the last 5 years, all the regulators just pushed back and went, what? you've been feeding it for a millennia to animals, but now it's a problem, but they've all done it. So, we need a bit more science there. But you're right, there's plenty of opportunities in that space. And from that point of view, then it's very, very exciting.
I was using that as an example. It could be growing it next to the road or, other things.
Yeah, but there's not everybody's facing similar issues and no one's really ahead. So every time people would get a funding to do something, well, then we need to wait for 2 years to get results of that. So all of this information is going to be coming out quite quickly. And then if you look at places where they've had an uninterrupted hemp industry like France, it's quite closed. So, you would have to be French to understand how the French industry works, sort of thing. That said, though, there are willing collaborative partners around the world as well.
Yeah.
So when you're growing building, can you just light it, take it straight down the boards, just harvest the whole plant?
Yes, you can harvest the whole plant, not letting it go to seed. So you'd actually be growing a cultivar specifically for fibre. That would be the ideal scenario.
So is it more like 10 or 12 tonnes at that point? If it's still
10 or 12 tonnes
yeah.
of what per acre?
If you're just growing from fibre opposed to growing to seed.
What's the number that you're asking about?
Just the volume that you could, I guess.
I don't know. That's probably Steve. Might know that in terms
Depends
of.
on the cultivar, right?
Yeah.
There's some that will give you 20 tonne a hectare, and you can count on 10 tonne a hectare. Anything that's short of growing for seed, it's much less. It's not a lot to do.
You can find the catalogue is allowed to cultivars. And you can choose what is on the market, and you can quite easily find what is the outcome of this quite easily.
It'll be interesting to see how it develops.
Like Poland science behind it, Czech, probably definitely Germany.
Interesting enough, Ukraine has an amazing hemp industry. They've got one of the largest breeding germplasms in the world. It's like,
And there's some great hemp construction happening in the Ukraine as well. There has been.
some talented people. But right, folks, we've got.
One question?
Yes.
You mentioned crop rotation, I think, at some stage. Do you need to have your land there for a period of time, or can you just keep growing?
In terms of the quality for the plant itself. Yeah, look, it depends. We were fortunate. The site we grow in Kekarengu has been in one family's ownership for 140 years. So we have a legacy of information on that site. Even so, we've discovered some fascinating things on the property from time to time, and we know that hemp is a particularly interesting plant in terms of what it takes out of the soil and what it provides back. So it all depends on the paddocks you're working with. If you don't know the history and you want to plant hemp and you want to plant it organically using organic practices, I talk to the certification bodies and see what they recommend. Because in our case, they were able to look at the property and see that it was carefully managed and documented over many, many years. It gave us an advantage in terms of applying for those certifications.
Okay. Well, folks, I'm going to have to cut it there because we need to sort of pack up and let the people lock up. The security guards wandering around. So I hope you've got some value out of that. If there's any other questions that you do have, please let us know, because others might have asked the same question and we can get that information out into a future newsletter. So thank you all for coming. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard.